Hello and welcome to the Real Women, Real Business podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Lynn Simon, and today I've got a very special guest joining us. We've got Kristyn Pereira, principal designer at REFORMA Interiors. And let me tell you, this girl is an absolute rock star. And she's going to talk to us a little bit today about some of the transition that she's gone through with her business. And I think that a lot of you ladies out there are going to be able to relate to her story, some of the things that she's facing, and there's going to be lots of great insights in here. So first and foremost, welcome, Kristyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So listen, I want to get right into things because you've got a bit of an interesting story in that you were previously working for a family business and you've now transitioned into your own design firm. So why don't you give a little bit of a background, first of all, to our audience as to what that transition looked like?
Yeah, for sure. So I started working in my parents' family business, I want to say about 7 years ago, and it was a brand new industry to me. But, being me, I didn't fit well in the background, and I really wanted to just jump in and take charge and, get my own clients and build the business. And I ended up kind of building a successful design and decorating company within the staging business. And the more and more that I did it, I realized that that was really where my fire was. That was where my passion was. And I wanted to spend more time focusing on that. Being a home staging business, it's very demanding, very time consuming. It's very like right when the realtors want it, right? So I could only take on so many design projects at a time. Like I can only do maybe a handful a year. And the more that I thought about it, and I started to get a little resentful of doing the staging projects because it was taking me away from what I wanted to do. So I had to get really honest with myself of, where do you want to go? And we've had, meetings, the three of us with my parents, of like, what's the future of the company? Where do we want to take this? And the more that we talked about it, the more we realized that we had different visions. They're planning retirement, I'm planning future. And they looked just very different. And so we kind of decided that the best thing for all of us was to separate. We could do what we wanted to do. They would have kind of a clear plan for retirement. I would have a clear trajectory of, what I wanted to do, focusing on design. And, it was all kind of the better thing for all of us. And we all got what we wanted in the end of it.
That's really interesting and really powerful. First of all, that you're identifying. I mean, that's not an easy conversation to have. So first, you identified for yourself that what your true passion was, and you could feel yourself being pulled away from that. I think that's something that a lot of people can really relate to, of that feeling
Yeah.
of, when you're doing certain things and you're just kind of dreading them, especially when it's the
Yeah.
core part of your business, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm
Totally.
excited doing this.
Yeah.
So I would imagine those conversations weren't easy with your parents either, though. But it's so wonderful that you're able to have those open discussions with them. So what did that look like for you to be able to make the transition from your parents' company into your own business?
Yes. I think I had to be really sure. I sat on it for a few months, to be honest. And something that I thought about, and I think that I always kind of knew that I wanted to have my own business. I just wasn't sure what that was going to look like or when that was going to be. And to rewind a little bit, if you're saying of like knowing that that was kind of what I wanted to do, I found myself, I would always pack with an assistant. So, like packing for a staging job, and I would find anytime I had to pack for a project, I was just in the worst mood. And I not like that, like I love working with my staff and we have music and we're singing, we're dancing, we're having a great time. And I just so crabby. And with them, so upset. And I was like, oh, because I don't want to do this. And I had to apologize to my sister. And I was like, I'm so sorry for just being this awful energy in the room, but I just don't want to do this. And it's taking me away from what I really enjoy doing. So I think that was like a really big awakening for me. And so then I had to really think about, okay, well, what is that going to look like? How is this going to affect my parents? What is the ripple effect of this?
Sure, yeah.
And, like maybe it's going to be kind of a hard thing in the beginning, but I think in the long run, but I had to really think about, what is that going to look like? How am I going to kind of take this on. And so we were at that point kind of having regular meetings. We always would have like a Friday meeting of what's the plan for the business? What are we working on? What are we doing? And so one Friday, we were talking about where we were going and what we're doing. And I was just like, I think that meeting up with this is not it. And so we just had a really, really honest conversation. And, we tried to kind of find maybe there was a middle ground of replacing the entry stager. And I could just focus on the decorating and we could take that into something else. Or it to be like a sister company or all sorts of different things. And I think it ended up that it wasn't what I wanted and it wasn't going to be an easy exit for them. But yeah, it was difficult and it took a few conversations to really kind of get on the same page as to what we wanted and what we were going to do. I'm really lucky to have very supportive, great parents that I have a really good relationship with.
For sure. For sure.
But yeah, with
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, it was terrifying for sure. Because I was like, okay, I'm just quitting my job. I'm going to leave you guys, but I promise I'm going to leave behind. Promise you're going to be fine too.
Well, and I think, but you're hitting on something that is so common for women, especially, is that, we're often a little bit afraid to disappoint someone by not doing something that they want. And in turn, we end up ignoring our own path and our own passions. And so good for you for identifying and recognizing that, having that open and honest conversation with your parents and allowing them to be a part of the conversation in an honest way. And I'm sure, I mean, I can only imagine if I was on their side of things. I mean, it's definitely gonna be a bit of a shock to the system, things that you were planning.
Sure.
They've got to pivot now and rethink some things, but ultimately, we always want, whether it's a family business or not, if I have someone on my team that says, listen, I've got to explore this other thing that's just really fueling me and where I really want to be, and I don't think I can do it while I stay with this company, I want to support them. And of course, I'm going to be selfish and think about, oh my gosh, poor me, I'm going to be losing an all-star. But at the same time, it's nice to know that you're part of, they've been a part of your journey. They got you to where you are. And to be able to kind of release you out into the world and let you see what you can do on your own is pretty spectacular too. So I'm sure they're enjoying it as much as, I'm sure there's, I don't want to put any words or feelings or anything on them by any means, but I can only imagine how proud they are all at the time. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you were in a decision-making role in that business, but you weren't the business owner. You weren't the one who started the company. You weren't the one who had to design the vision. You were definitely helping to steer the ship, and you were very much involved in, identifying and mapping out the future of the company once you joined the team, but you didn't start it off. If I recall, the business had been around for almost a decade, I think, before you joined it. Is that about right?
Almost, yeah. I think about 8 years or so when I started. Yeah.
Okay. So it was pretty well established by the time you came on today. So now you're out on your own. You're principal designer running REFORMA Interiors, and you had to start from ground zero.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, how did your previous experience help you with that? What did you feel maybe you weren't prepared for? Tell us a little bit about how that felt.
Yeah, it was overwhelming for sure. I think I started with, Googling, what do I need to do to start a business? Then this list, and I created those lists, and then the list grew and grew, and I was like, okay, I just had to do that. And I'm like, oh, actually, there's all of these things, and I think the list just still keeps growing. I think all of those startup things are a lot. Even just, I think the fact that things always take way longer than you expect them to take. I remember spending a full 11-hour day trying to create an email signature with links in it, which, prepared. You're never prepared for that. I would just, as in and, make my email signature somebody on our team, and then it just magically appeared. So I think even that transition of not having all that support of my parents and our team and our admin and our assistants and all of these things, all of these people that were supporting me to do these things, now it's all on me. So that was definitely a rude awakening. But I think also a big thing has been, not having that kind of discussions of, what I was saying, and you have those Friday meetings of where are we going, what are we doing?
Right.
that now I'm kind of making these decisions on my own, and having an accountability partner has been really helpful for that. To be able to have that second opinion, somebody to bounce ideas off of, where I don't feel kind of alone on this island, and just hoping that I'm making the right decision. So yeah, that's definitely been kind of a big shock, because I'm just used to be surrounded by people every day.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that part, but yeah, you had these two other decision makers, not to mention the supportive staff as well, of people who could bash forward ideas and such. And so now you've got all that decision making on your own. And I mean, I know firsthand how lonely it can feel being a solopreneur. And like you said, all the decisions are on you. And you could ask some friends and family, but they don't necessarily have the right insights to be able to properly guide you, even on,
Yeah.
figuring out branding and such. I know people have said, well, I asked my family which brand they thought would be best, or which logo they thought would be best for my brand. And, the responses they get for that versus the response that they might get from a business coach or an accountability partner, someone who has a more intimate knowledge and understanding as to what their brand actually represents. Those are going to be very different responses usually. And both have merit, don't get me wrong, but there's something to be said for someone being more invested in the day-to-day of your business. And that's where, like you said, an accountability partner, a business coach, a mastermind group, all of those things are so invaluable when you're a solopreneur, because you have so many questions. And some of them you're going to have to figure out on your own, but it's nice when you're like, I'm just kind of stuck on this, and you think you're going down the right path, but somebody's just getting that validation. Or maybe they give you the validation you need, but they're like, but what if you tweaked it just in this small way? And it's amazing what that small little tweak can do. So, yeah.
Or sometimes just the space to talk it out and figure it out on your own.
So I find the same thing sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, thank you for not giving me a single answer.
Yeah.
I just rambled and answered all of my own questions, but doing it out loud by myself wouldn't have had the same sort of gratification, I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
So now you're in the interior design industry. And I mean, I know firsthand building a brand and a presence in that industry can be challenging to make yourself stand out. So I know that you've got a bit of a niche that you're focusing on. So how are you going about sort of defining that unique identity and positioning yourself in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's taken a lot of real soul searching to figure out, what I'm passionate about, what I want to share, how I'm going to serve, what gifts am I giving to people, and what's the best of me that I can give, which has really kind of brought me to this place of wellness focused design, and something that's such a huge part of my life, and something that I deep dive into personally. Then I think something that I've been trying to incorporate into my designs, but just didn't really understand how to articulate it. So I've been really pushing that messaging on my social media and with my blog posts, and networking, and think that's been a really big thing, of just talking to people and letting them know what I'm doing, letting them know that I'm doing something a little bit different. I do have a bit of a niche, and so just kind of trying to get the word out there as organically as possible. But I think, it's been a lot of just really kind of listening to myself in terms of the branding and what feels good and what's representative of me. And I think that I don't take for granted that I have the power to it's one thing to not have the people to bounce ideas off of and to make decisions together, but also this is so reflective of me now. And so really kind of getting into what's the representative of me, how do I want to show up and to be able to serve people. So,
and that's a really interesting point as well, though, because going back to, when you were working for someone else, you're kind of going along their path and you got your feet wet in the design industry. I mean, more than what you got them soaked, let's face it, like you dove head in. That's not but so it allows you a little bit more space now that you're on your own to identify, where do you really want to put that focus and specialize a little bit too, which is, it will make you stand out in the marketplace. And so you mentioned it's wellness design that you are incorporating. So tell us a little bit about what wellness design looks like. Because I would imagine there's probably run up against this quite a bit of what does that mean? So
what does it mean?
That looks like, yeah.
Yeah. I think just more than anything is, creating spaces that feel good for people. And I think that, we've really gotten into a huge trend of eating well and exercising and meditating and self-care and all those things.
My language.
But I think that it really starts with your surroundings and how you wake up, and the space that you're in has energy and it can change how you feel. I think that's really powerful. Waking up into a room with dark walls and there's clothes all over the place, you're going to feel really different waking up in that than, a beautiful room that, has plants and texture and warmth and it feels warm and inviting. You're going to wake up, you're going to feel differently. And it's also going to feel different when you come home into that space and after a long, stressful day. And so to really be able to create spaces that have good energy flow, that are grounding, I think that that's a really big thing that's incorporating like biophilic design. And the idea is having a space that's grounding. So it's, bringing in colors of nature, bringing in plants and soft textures and kind of bringing the outside in a little bit to kind of decompress you. And I think that that's really important, a way that you feel when you walk into a room. So I want to be able to give that to people so that, when they're trying to eat well and think and, take care of their bodies, that, we're taking care of their energy and their feelings at the same time too. And I think that's something that is really overlooked. And nobody really thinks about it, especially young families too, when people just think like it's okay, we just have chaos and things, and it doesn't have to be that way. And, helping with organization and having function as well too, but to be able to just kind of create that tranquility in a way. And even for the kids, I think it's a really powerful thing as well.
I think that it's something that, as much as none of us want to go back and relive the pandemic days by any means, but if there's something that it brought into focus, it was the importance and value of enjoying and being able to appreciate the space that you're in. And if it is chaotic, if it doesn't feel welcoming and serene in some way, then it's a lot easier to get stressed out and to develop unhealthy habits or just not feel at peace. And so to be able to create a space that allows you to be able to do that. And I know there's probably lots of people that are listening, and I talk about this quite often, is figure out what you specialize in, create your messaging, communicate it to that particular audience. And it doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that you're not going to work with other people or that you're not going to attract others, of course. But, I think that when you can introduce something like that, so someone who's just looking for any old interior designer happens to stumble across your page is going to get that much more of an elevated experience once they start chatting with you and, walking through your process a little bit and realizing like, oh, this is going to be a whole different experience. I mean, you get so much more out of this. So I think that's great that you have found that niche. And again, it gives you joy and it's something that you practice in your everyday life as well. So I'm sure it's that much easier to be able to share it with others too.
Yeah, but for sure.
Okay. So now, obviously, given everything you're telling us, you're super creative. You've got that creative soul, and I have experience working with creative entrepreneurs. And in my experience, business management is not exactly a strength for most creative entrepreneurs. How do you find that balance of trying to balance that artistic part of you that just wants to jump out at every turn while meeting the demands of running a business day to day?
Yeah. I think was a really interesting thing working with my parents, because my mom is, super creative and so far on the left brain. And my dad is like, loves spreadsheets with all the tabs and all the formulas and like so system oriented. And that's, I find I was like somewhere kind of in the middle. Where I could understand him and I could understand her, and I was like, we need both. But with like I do the middleman of like, the tiebreaker and things. But I was very grateful that my dad taught me a lot of kind of the behind the scenes things and all of that I was very involved in. And so it's definitely not where I love to spend my time, but it is a necessary evil. But I've found there's some times where I get to spend more time focusing on that, which is, this is my baby that I'm growing, but it's energizing in that way.
Right.
Building.
Like you're creating.
I feel like I'm building, and in terms of like doing the creative thing, it's great, but it's not it's not building in the same way. So I think, trying to have times that I try to block off like Monday and Friday, that can be my times that, I'm dedicating to working on the business itself, and doing those things and the behind the scenes and the spreadsheets and all of those beautiful things. And I,
Big fan of time blocking. You know that I'm a big fan of
yeah.
Yes.
And then wherever I can fit it in between the week, I will do that. But I found that, Monday through Friday, I'm not necessarily going to give my best to my
Sure.
clients. So it's better for me to be here at my desk. It's just going to be a better use of my time. I'm going to be able to show up better in both areas. So I'm trying to, I think blocking off that time and batching has been a game changer for sure.
And what sort of things are you doing when you do need to recharge? Because I know, it's some days I spend in the office and it's super rewarding some days. If you knock off a solid project that you've been, really slaving over, it feels great to knock it off. And at the same time, in order to be able to move on to the next task, you got to recharge a little bit. What sort of things do you practice yourself for recharging?
Throughout the day?
Yeah.
I always like to have music going. And I try to play it kind of on the opposite end of me. And so I will take little breaks, get some water, maybe have a little dance party, hang out with my cat, just dance with her a little bit. But I think just to be able to like move, enjoy, especially if the sun is out, you say what it is, enjoy this for a minute. I think it's a really great thing. Or sometimes I'll reach out to my sister, have a phone call. I've been getting into walks. I know that you're a big fan of walks.
I'm a big fan of
The kind of,
I feel it when I do bum walk for a while. Yeah, I feel it.
yeah. It's never been my thing. But I also have been so used to being out at staging projects at consults, working in the warehouse, walking around. And so now that I found that I'm much more stationary, it feels different. And so, a couple of weeks ago, I found this beautiful trail across the street from me, and I went for a walk. Felt so different after, and I was like, okay, now I get it.
Well, and similarly, I used to also be the one who was more hands-on, physically out of the jobs, running here and there. So I was getting the fresh air, I was getting the movement, and actually, like I own a convertible, mainly because I spent so much time just going from one appointment to the next that I bought a convertible because I love the outdoors so much that I was like, if I'm not going to be able to actually enjoy time outside, I want to at least be able to put the top down from the apartments or appointments and such. And I don't care whether or not my hair gets messed up as long as I get a little bit of fresh air. So now that I'm doing more office work and I spend a lot of my days on calls with my clients and such. And so I need that sort of reset to bring my best into every one of my appointments. And one of the things that I learned actually from my naturopath, and I fought her on this, and I think you and I have talked about this, but when it comes to your walks, I've always been a power walker. And the key to a good walk to really reset your mind is actually a slow movement walk, which I struggled with for the longest time, but have mastered in the last couple of years. And I know there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this saying like, no, I got to walk fast. Don't get me wrong. I power walk. Like if I'm going, when we went to Rome, I power through that city. I walked at a really good click. But if I'm going for a reset type of walk, it is a slow pace, smooth kind of walk. It's not necessarily even a far distance.
Yeah.
Just getting like that nice slow movement. Are you more of a power walker or are you more of a slow paced walker? Where are you at these days?
I think in terms of a walk, I'm leisurely. But if I'm going somewhere, like if I'm at the mall or I'm trying to go somewhere, like to a restaurant or something, I'm power walking and like slow walkers in front of me. But like if I'm being leisurely, I'm being leisurely, right? If nobody, I'm okay with it.
I call that mission walking. Mission walking. Yeah. On a mission. I have somewhere to go.
Always on a mission.
Yes.
But if my mission is just to relax for a second, I can do that. Do you listen to anything while you're walking? Or are you just...
Yeah, depends. It's a really good question. There are some times where, so most of the time I would say I listen to an audiobook or a podcast. I love my audiobooks and podcasts. Not so much music. Music is more of like if I'm going for a run, I want some high energy music, but for my walks, I prefer something more talking. But there are times where I will just find that my mind just needs to work through some things, in which case I will turn everything off and just enjoy the sounds around me. I will say that my walks are one of the most powerful things I do every day. When I come back from my walk, it's like I've solved half the problems. And it's not necessarily fully accurate, but it feels like a weight's been lifted. I can really work through some
Right.
things. Yeah. I feel the same way when I go driving though, too. I also love a good drive, but not everyone's into just going for drives. I don't like to waste gas. I don't like to go for a drive just to go for a drive. But if I am going for a drive,
Right.
solve some problems while I'm on that drive. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Sometimes I just don't turn the music on, and it's amazing the things that you work out in silence.
Oh,
You have to
absolutely.
to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the little aha moments that come when you're doing that too, of like, how did I not think of this sooner? And the reason is because if your mind is never at rest, you don't actually have the capacity to have that extra little bit of creativity and think outside of the parameters of I need to do this, that you're not looking at another way to approach something. So when you've got
Yeah.
something that's really kind of weighing on you, maybe it's a great example is maybe someone has asked you for a favor or to participate in an event, and you're not sure that it really aligns with what you're looking to do, but you don't know how to say no. And again, if you don't have the time to kind of sit down and really work through it, you're probably not going to get the answers that you need. You go for a walk and you might get that aha moment of like, oh, well, I don't want to say yes to what they're asking me, but what if I offered them this alternative that ends up being a bit more of a win-win? I had it
Yeah.
happen recently where I was asked to do a meeting with one of the vendors that I work with through my training program. And they wanted to do a meeting to just show me some things that they wanted to introduce to the industry. And given the knowledge that I have of the industry, they thought I would be a great person to give them some feedback. So I'd love to give you feedback. But the thought of scheduling in one more meeting in my day was just overwhelming. So I came up with the
Yeah.
alternative. I said, you know what? Why don't you do a quick screen share video, send it to me of what it is that you're looking to do, and I'll do the same thing in return. I'll send you my thoughts. So it's still sort of that audio conversation without
Right.
me having to like stop everything I'm doing at a specific time of the day when I already have so many of those on the go. And I was sort of stressing out about, I don't want to say no to them because they are a valued partner. And at the same time, I also just really don't have the capacity right now. And no one ever wants to hear you're too busy for them. So how do we find kind of a happy medium? So that was kind of what I came up with. So, but again, I wouldn't have had the capacity to come up with that if I hadn't been able to go for a walk. So I love that.
100%. It's amazing how when you give yourself the space to just be quiet, that the answers are always available. You always know. It's just to give yourself the space to be able to hear it, right?
That's exactly it. Oh, and I mean, I can imagine there's so many people that are listening right now and saying like, but how do I find that space? It's a whole other episode, trust me. But
Yeah.
but the reality is though that
Don't get me started. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but one of the things I say about going for those breaks is you might think I don't have time for a break. The reality is though that let's say you have a task that if you don't go for a break, you're like this, I gotta spend the next hour working on this task. Go for the 15-minute break, and I'll bet you can complete that task in 30 to 45 minutes instead. So it takes the same amount of time in the end, but you got to break out of it. And it's something I have to remind myself of frequently on those super busy days. I have to remind myself those breaks matter. And they can look like a variety of things. Maybe you're not going for a walk. Like you said, you got your little dance party. Maybe it's just going and snuggling with your cat. Maybe it's, just going to, calling your sister, calling a friend, calling your mom that you haven't talked to in a while, whatever it looks like for you. It could even just be a matter of going into the kitchen and making yourself a lovely cup of tea and just sitting with it for a few minutes in your thoughts, but in a different room and in a different chair,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm glad that you're incorporating that, especially as you're, now dealing with the entrepreneurship aspect of things. And it's amazing how hectic it can be on a day-to-day basis. So looking ahead,
Sure.
what would you say are your goals and aspirations for this design firm? How do you plan to continue to grow and evolve that business and continue to be a leader in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm definitely trying to get the word out there. I think I definitely kind of made a name for myself in the staging industry. And so trying to kind of transition that over and keep the connections with my realtors and a lot of networking and trying to get out with social media and doing, wonderful interviews like this. I think long term, I want to be able to grow my team so that I can, have to not spend so much time on the nitty gritty of things, but I know it needs to do.
Sure.
But I want to, yeah, definitely be able to expand my team. Hopefully, I would love to be able to do that at the end of the year. Um, and just grow and build and be able to serve more people, which I'm not going to be able to do on my own. And so for right now, that is that is the
Right.
goal, and to be able to kind of,
That message.
yeah.
Well, I think you're well positioned with the experience that you have. You're well positioned to be able to build a team. I mean, you've got so many real world experiences and advantages that others don't necessarily have when they're making their first hires. You already know some of the pitfalls and the common mistakes that are made in hiring that you can, potentially avoid a lot of those, which is great. And you can make sure that you're finding someone who's aligning with your true company vision and your true goals. And I think it's important, for every entrepreneur to know how to do all the things in your business, but also identify sooner than later, as early as possible, identify what are the tasks that you would like to offload and start putting those systems in place to be able to pass those off to someone else so that if they are draining you
100%.
and bringing you down, that you're not doing them. I mean, for myself, one of the first things I offloaded was social media because I just did not enjoy it. And I'm back to
Yeah.
doing social media, of course, for my coaching business. I've taken that on because I've got to identify what that looks like before I can pass it off to someone else anyway. So yeah, no, I think it's great. I'm watching all the things that you're doing, and I love the messaging that you're putting out there. I think you've got a fantastic brand. You're incredibly talented. So I know you're going to be doing amazing things, and it's going to be fabulous for us to continue to watch this journey. So listen, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
You can find me on my website at reformainteriors.ca or on Instagram, which is at Reforma Interior.
Perfect. I will make sure that both of those are in the show notes for everyone. And listen, everyone, thank you so much to Kristyn for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in today. If what we're seeing resonated with you today, I really hope you'll tune in again next week and allow me to continue to be a part of your journey. Be sure to leave us a review, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep thriving, everyone. Thank you again, Kristyn, for joining us.
Thanks so much, Shauna Lynn. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Bye.